Straight ahead on Law&Crime Daily, famed criminal defense attorney F. Lee Bailey dies. Our interview with him just weeks ago about his time representing O.J. Simpson at trial and who he believed really killed Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman.
If the defendant had no opportunity to commit the crime, case over, right there.
Two teens accused of firing at deputies in Florida, the 12-year-old boy appearing in court as the 14-year-old girl recovers in a hospital. And the heartbreaking testimony in the Tennessee trial of a father accused of murdering his 5-year-old autistic son. Was Joseph Daniels angry and violent like the prosecution claims, or did he give a false confession?
Joe dead. Joe dead. Joe dead.
Law&Crime Daily covering court cases from coast to coast. Welcome everyone to Law&Crime Daily. I'm Brian Buckmire along with Terri Austin. The legal world has lost a giant. Criminal defense attorney F. Lee Bailey has died. He was 87. Law&Crime's Angenette Levy spoke with Bailey recently and has more on his life and a theory about one of his most well-known clients.
Yeah, Brian, I spoke with F. Lee Bailey in one of his last interviews just in the last several weeks, as you mentioned. We talked about a new book he's written about the O.J. Simpson case.
I didn't lose any sleep as to what the decision would be.
That was F. Lee Bailey discussing the case that made him a household name. He represented Cleveland doctor Sam Shepard at the U.S. Supreme Court in 1966. Shepard v. Maxwell was a landmark case that established guidelines for pretrial publicity. The High Court found Shepard's first trial had a carnival-like atmosphere. In a second trial, the jury acquitted Shepard in the murder of his pregnant wife, Marilyn.
The justice who wrote the opinion in the Shepard case and told me later on that he took it right out of my brief, and I should be proud. As I left the room, I thought I picked up a wig coming off his end of the bench.
Bailey would go on to represent heiress Patty Hearst against charges she robbed a bank, suspected Boston Strangler Albert DeSalvo, and perhaps most famously, O.J. Simpson.
People that came up to me and said, you know, you're a great lawyer, but you prostituted your talents getting that N guy off. And people who said that to me shouldn't have been. I'm talking about lawyers and in one case, a judge.
Bailey wrote a book about his time representing Simpson that will come out in a matter of days. The Truth About the O.J. Simpson Trial by the architect of the defense. Bailey's cross-examinations were legendary. After all of these years, Bailey maintains Simpson is factually innocent of the murders of his ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and Ron Goldman.
There was no opportunity. And we showed that, and the record is very clear with a timeline showing where everybody was at certain times. Simpson could not have committed those murders and then gotten on that airplane to Chicago. It's that simple.
Bailey believed drug dealers targeting a friend of Nicole Brown Simpson's, Faye Resnick, over a drug debt killed Nicole, and Ron Goldman simply happened upon the scene while returning a pair of glasses.
And I think someone came to that home and was seen, a witness we never got to use, but is in the book to be sure, saw Nicole talking angrily with some people on the street.
The jury didn't hear that theory, but acquitted Simpson. He posted on Twitter about his friend.
Lee was like, I guess about 87 years old, but boy, was he full of energy. I would tell him, Lee, I got to go to bed. I got to go. And Lee would be up the next morning ready to hit the streets. But F. Lee Bailey was a great guy.
After representing Simpson, Bailey's life took a sad turn. He was disbarred in Florida and Massachusetts, but still worked as a consultant and had strong opinions about the justice system.
Our justice system not only is not terribly good when it's compared to many outside this country, but it's not getting any better and it's not under control.
F. Lee Bailey died just 7 days before what would have been his 88th birthday. He was incredibly excited about his new book coming out, and we had actually talked about getting together yet again over Zoom to talk about it in more detail. Sadly, though, that wasn't meant to be. Brian?
Thanks, Angenette. Joining us today is former federal prosecutor Gene Rossi and Terri Austin. Gene, factually innocent, not just not guilty. What do you think of F. Lee Bailey's alternative theory?
It doesn't work.
There was DNA in the truck. He had a cut on his finger. He had the famous Bronco ride where that shows consciousness of guilt. If O.J. Simpson were innocent, his actions and the evidence, the DNA, sure did not point towards innocence.
All right. Now, Terri represented countless people, a giant in many ways. When you think of F. Lee Bailey, what comes to mind to you? What's his legacy?
I think his legacy is the fact that he was an incredible litigator. There's no question about it. He was flamboyant. He made points that people will never forget. And obviously, the O.J. Simpson trial was one of those trials. The biggest thing that he did in that trial was he cross-examined the detective, Mark Furman, and he got him to swear on the stand that he never used the N-word. And of course, that dream team was able to show that he had, in fact, used the word. So that meant he wasn't credible. And I think that had a lot to do with the verdict at the end of the day.
Now, Angenette, we saw a little bit of O.J. there speaking about F. Lee Bailey, but did Bailey stay in touch with his fellow Dream Team lawyers?
Yeah, to our knowledge, he stayed in touch with Alan Dershowitz, not really clear about a lot of the others. He famously had a falling out with Robert Shapiro, who was the lead attorney in the very beginning of the case, but then Johnny Cochran took over that role. He had been friends with Robert Shapiro for decades, and after this case, they had a huge falling out. So there was definitely no love lost there, and I've read the first chapter of the book, and has some pretty critical words for Robert Shapiro in it.
Yeah, well, like we said, a giant in the legal community has been lost. And of course, we send our condolences. Thank you, everyone. Still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, what happened to baby Joe? What the missing 5-year-old sibling told an investigator as a father stands trial for murder. But first, the shocking video as 2 Florida teens face charges for shooting at law enforcement. We break down the first court appearance of a 12-year-old boy ahead. Welcome back. A 12-year-old boy charged with attempted murder of law enforcement appeared in court in Florida. The local sheriff says the boy, along with a 14-year-old girl, broke out of a foster home and engaged in a shootout with deputies.
Appears the female has a long gun pointed toward me. I have to hold my cover. Stand by.
Deputies in Florida took cover responding to a report of a home broken into. A 14-year-old girl and 12-year-old boy reportedly escaped their foster home and found another home with AK-47s and 200 rounds of ammunition.
Juvenile male looks like he has something in his hand as well.
According to the sheriff, the deputies took fire for 45 minutes and only returned fire when the 14-year-old exited the house and continued to fire.
Put the gun down now!
And I believe in my heart she's still alive today because of the first treatment she received from the deputies. Obviously, she received great help in hospital care, but those deputies were reacting as quickly as they could.
On Thursday, the 12-year-old boy made his first appearance in court on charges of armed burglary and attempted murder. The judge ordered the boy be held in secure detention until his arraignment on June 23rd.
He advised that the 14-year-old made a statement, "I'm going to roll this down like GTA," referring to the video game Grand Theft Auto.
The sheriff described the 2 teens as Bonnie and Clyde and said the 12-year-old boy told investigators he fired to harm cops. The boy does not have a criminal record, but the girl was arrested in April for setting fire to empty lots. And the sheriff says the foster home is a known problem.
FUMPS has been a problem since I've been the sheriff or probably beyond. We were there 289 times for calls for service and 220. We've been there 89 times so far this year.
Back with us is former federal prosecutor Gene Rossi and Terri Austin. Terri, according to the police, these 2 shot at officers from the pool deck, the bedroom, the garage. Based on the severity of these crimes and their age, do you think they'll be tried as minors or adults?
Well, I think that it's up to the state attorney's office to determine that question. Listen, the seriousness of this crime, it's a capital offense. There's no question they could be here. And they were using AK-47s. They are children. The 12-year-old boy appeared in court, and the judge was explaining his rights to him. And clearly, this child is someone who is going to have to go through a system that is intended for adults. So I think that the authorities are going to have to look at this very carefully before they make that final determination.
Now, Gene, that focuses on the 12 and the 14-year-old, but could an investigation go beyond just the shooting? Like how they broke out of foster care and how those guns were properly stored or not stored properly?
Well, you're talking about whether the foster home has criminal or civil liability. I think the foster home may have civil liability for whatever victim want to bring suit against that. Regarding criminal liability against the foster home, that would be a stretch. You'd have to show some kind of criminal negligence, and I don't know if you'd have that.
Exactly. I definitely think the criminal might be a bit of a stretch, but civil, Gene, just really quickly, maybe the officers who got shot at, maybe they can say, hey, you should have kept these kids in line because then I'm the one who's risking my life. Could that be potential?
Oh, absolutely. And if any of those officers had died, those families and of the victims, the officers, they could have filed a wrongful death suit against the foster home for negligence.
Yeah, that would have been, thankfully, none of the officers died. From what we understand, the charges are merely attempted murder. No one was hit or harmed other than the 14-year-old who's recovering, but thank you both for that input. Let's check in on some top legal stories making headlines at the Law and Crime Network, including an Ohio judge denying a motion for a mistrial in the so-called pizza delivery murder. Erica Stefanko was convicted of placing a fake pizza order at Domino's to lure Ashley Biggs to her death. Stefanko's then husband, Chad Cobb, was in a heated custody battle with Biggs. Cobb pled guilty to the murder of Biggs and helped to implicate Stefanko, taking the stand against her. Stefanko's defense attorney says she wasn't given a fair trial due to limitations during the pandemic. And in California, explosive testimony came from Robert Durst's former housekeeper, who claims she saw blood on a dishwasher after the disappearance of Durst's first wife, Kathy, in 1982. The real estate heir is on trial for allegedly shooting and killing his lifelong friend Susan Berman in December 2000. Witnesses are being called in relation to his wife, Kathy Durst, because the prosecution case rests on 2 points. 1, Susan Berman witnessed the crime of Kathy Durst's presumed murder and was intentionally killed because of that. 2, Robert Durst killed Berman by lying in wait at her home, waiting for the right moment to kill her. Durst's defense says he didn't kill Berman and doesn't know who did. Durst is expected to take the stand in his own defense. The trial could last up to 6 months. Testimony is set to resume on Monday. Retired Tulsa Police Sergeant Sean Sticks Larkin is speaking to a former SWAT team member about a hostage situation on the latest episode of his podcast, Cop Tales.
All right. So you're working for ATF with this home invasion, and these guys are robbing the cartel?
Yeah.
That's stupid.
Doesn't end well for you at all. So they said, hey, these guys have committed several murders. We want you to go undercover and like try to infiltrate this group. And I was like, well, I guess this is where I hug my mom and dad by, like, I love you, Mom. So they had an informant whose family was doing this, and they made the introduction. And basically these guys were, targeting high-level cartel-type drug dealers. They'd find out where their stash house was, kick the door in, execute them, steal their dope, drive it back down to Miami, push it out on the streets. And I was like, all right, let's do it.
Interesting story. Make sure to check out Sean Larkin's Cop Tales podcast. Coming up on Law and Crime Daily, who is Baby Joe? What you need to know about the missing 5-year-old and his father on trial for his murder after the break. Welcome back. We're heading to Tennessee, where a father is accused of murdering his 5-year-old son. Witnesses are taking the stand, painting a picture of what the young boy was like.
He was very funny. He was very energetic. He loved to play and he loved to joke around.
Joseph Clyde Daniels, speech therapist, would work with him 3 days a week in kindergarten.
What is it, Joe? Well, which one was that?
The 5-year-old boy, also known as Baby Joe, was autistic and working on his speech and motor skills.
He really took instruction well. He enjoyed doing the activities that we were doing, and he was making he made a lot of progress. He had a lot of potential.
Baby Joe was last seen on April 3rd, 2018. His father, Joseph Ray Daniels, reported him as missing the next day. Search crews gathered, and Baby Joe's school bus driver even offered to shuttle volunteers around.
100%, they were all in for it.
But 3 days later, investigators say Daniels confessed to whipping the boy for urinating on the floor. Prosecutors say Daniels then told them he put the boy outside and baby Joe ran towards the porch. The defendant allegedly brought him back inside and slammed his body on the coffee table. The defense says Daniels is innocent and claims baby Joe could have left the home by himself.
So he could grasp that door handle if he wanted to, couldn't he?
If he wanted to.
And he could turn that door handle and open the door, couldn't he?
Yes.
Daniels led investigators to where he said he disposed of baby Joe's body, but his remains have never been recovered. Daniels is charged with first-degree murder. The boy's mother, Crystal Daniels, is charged with aggravated child neglect or endangerment and helping to cover up the crime.
G H I. What is it? J.
When we come back, the chilling conversation overheard by investigators as they search for the missing 5-year-old boy. That testimony and more next. Back now to the trial of Joseph Daniels. A state investigator says he arrived at the home to collect information about the missing 5-year-old boy when the 3-year-old brother of baby Joe walked in saying this.
Come into the room, that's the first time I recall seeing Noah. He had come up to my right and he had stated or asked more, Joe dead. Joe dead. Joe dead. And elderly lady that was there in the room with us said, yes, baby, Joe dead.
I want to make sure I get this clear. Were you asking questions of Noah?
No.
He just entered the room?
He entered from the back and on my right, asking that 3 times, yeah.
He walked in and 3 times said, Joe dead?
Yes.
Joe dead?
Yes.
Joe dead?
Yes.
And you, in your testimony, is that what happened after that?
The elderly lady, Aunt Joyce, said, yes, baby, Joe dead.
And
then she reached down and picked up
Noah?
Yeah.
Okay.
On cross, the defense asked if the 3-year-old's statements of Joe dead changed the investigation in any way.
It was being coordinated at the property. If you're facing the house to the right.
So there's a significant number of people at the area.
Yes.
It was said in 2 or 3 different ways here, but when Noah came in to talk to Aunt Joyce, he asked her?
He didn't ask her, he asked.
He just asked?
Out, yes. He wasn't directing
so he's
at her.
asking if he's dead?
Yeah.
At that point, had you witnessed anyone discussing the possibility that with Joe missing at that period, he would be deceased?
No, sir. We were still under the assumption we had a missing child.
So would it be possible that sometime during the 6 hours of searching that would have been discussed?
But not by me.
In this trial, the jury's allowed to ask questions after every testifying witness. The jury had one key question about the phrase 3-year-old Noah has said.
All right, I have 2 questions from the jurors. First question is, did Mr. Morris perceive Noah's words as a question or a statement? The second is, was the tractor trailer ever searched? Clearly, the second one of those is a question that's legitimate, and I don't have a problem with it. Either side wish to be heard about whether or not I should or should not ask that question. Well, let's start with Mr. Morris perceiving the Noah's words as a question or a statement. Well, what I'm proposing to do is to bring the jury back and make sure they understand that the first question was asked and answered by Mr. Mitchell and Mr. Morris right before we sent him out. The second question, I'm going to ask him if he knows personally, but I'll let them know that there will be further evidence on that issue.
All right, let's bring Gene and Terri back in one last time. Gene, this is a new one for me. Jurors get to question the witness. What did you make of this rule and the juror's question that you saw just there?
Well, let's go to the rule. I've seen one trial, I think it was in Wisconsin, but it is sort of developing that jurors can ask questions. I like it only if the questions don't become ridiculous, they don't become voluminous, and they focus on an issue that hasn't already been addressed. So going to the questions given to the judge, whether the 3-year-old Noah asked the question or made a statement, that was answered. So that should not be asked by the judge. The other question I thought was good, but the prosecution seems that they are prepared to answer that question in upcoming presentation of witnesses.
Yeah.
So I like it.
Yeah, so do I. It kind of also gives the lawyers, I think, a gauge as to where are they thinking, what are they looking at, and maybe they can adapt and alter future questions to help guide the jury where they want. Terri, the judge ruled that statements made by the brother and the aunt were allowed. If it is hearsay, why is the judge allowing the statements in?
You know, Judge Wolf is very considered when he makes these decisions. He takes the time to think about it. He even cites cases. And the statement that you heard on the stand from Agent Brent Morse, he was from the Emergency Management Agency. He said he actually heard Noah come out and say, "Joe dead, Joe dead, Joe dead," 3 times. And he heard the aunt say, "Yes, Noah's dead." And that would normally be hearsay, but the exception to that is the excited utterance. And the judge explained in great detail why this was an excited utterance. Even though the actual event did not occur, the whole event in totality with all of the agencies who were at the home, that was the event. And so this is still an excited utterance.
Yeah, and as an exception to hearsay, that comes in, and that's why the jury hear it. Gene, Terri, thank you very much. And thank you for joining us here on Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.